Madhava Kunja Bihare. Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhare. Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhare. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachare. Yamunatira Vanachare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajakcharis Tadasismad. His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Grantaraj Shri Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Ki, Shishi Radha Radhanath Ki, Shri Giri Govardhan Ki, Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki, Sankirtan Yagya Ki, Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Devotees, we are today going to be reading from and studying the first chapter of Nectar of Devotion, which is titled Characteristics of Pure Devotional Service. Very nice. And extremely interesting and extremely important, of course. So, to begin with, we will read the verse which Srila Rupa Goswami has given in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which gives the definition and specifically states the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service. Kleshagni shubhada moksha, laguta krit sudurlabha, sandrananda visheshatma, Sri Krishna karshani chasa. Which means, and we've got a particular translation here which is using kind of rather unusual language, but anyway, it's the translation. It is a translation of the verse. Shuddha Bhakti, Shuddha means pure. So pure Bhakti, pure devotional service. Shuddha Bhakti extirpates Kleshagni, distress. I wouldn't have used. Anyway, extirpates basically means destroys, does away with. Shuddha Bhakti extirpates Kleshagni, distress. That's the first characteristic that, as Prabhupada puts it, brings immediate relief from all kinds of material distress. Then Shubhada offers good fortune, or Prabhupada says, is the beginning of all auspiciousness. Actually, let me just, rather than the next one, Moksha Laguta Krit, exposes the inanity of liberation. Really. I mean, that's a way of putting it, but not really a normal way of putting it. So let me read the translation just by reading Srila Prabhupada's translations of the 6 terms. So Shuddha Bhakti, yes, Kleshagni brings immediate relief from all kinds of material distress. Shubhada, pure devotional service, is the beginning of all auspiciousness. Shubha means auspiciousness, and da means to give, like dan is a Sanskrit term meaning to donate, usually. Shubhada, so it gives. It is the beginning of all auspiciousness. Sandrananda Visheshatma, pure devotional service, automatically puts one in transcendental pleasure. Sudurlabha, pure devotional service, is rarely achieved. Moksha Laguta Krit, those in pure devotional service deride even the conception of liberation. And sixth one, Sri Krishna Akarshani. Pure devotional service is the only means to attract Krishna. Yes, so there you go, devotees. These are the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service, which this first chapter of Nectar of Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, is focusing on. And I'm aware that you started this, it's like a seminar basically on Nectar of Devotion. It's really, really very good, very valuable. I'm aware you started it last week, Sunday. And so you went through, I assume you went through the introduction and the verse, Anyabilashita shunyam jnana karma jnanavritam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktir uttama, which is a definition of what is Shuddha Bhakti, or pure devotional service. But here now, we're reading about the characteristics of it. You could say how to recognize the presence of pure devotional service in a person. If they are showing 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, or even all of these characteristics of pure devotional service, then even if they're only exhibiting 1 of the 6, then that means that at least an element of pure devotional service is there in that devotee. They may not be just like fully in pure devotional service, but at least some element of it is there, some recognizable touch or recognizable presence of pure devotional service is there. So let me just run through them again quickly. First one, pure devotional service brings immediate relief from all kinds of material distress. Then it's the beginning of all auspiciousness. Then it automatically puts you in transcendental pleasure. Then it is rarely achieved. Then those who are in it deride even the conception of liberation, salvation. Then it's the only way to attract Krishna. There's no other way. You can't bribe him. You can't talk him into having a relationship with you. You can't fool him into having a relationship with you. You know, sometimes we've seen, even amongst devotees, that some devotees putting on a show of being a good devotee just to attract some other devotee of the opposite sex, and then some relationship becomes established. But then as soon or just shortly after it's established, or like they're married, you could say, suddenly the person sees a different side of that devotee. These things happen. In material life, of course, these things happen all the time. So anyway, now the first point, so that's the list of 6. The next point is very important point and very interesting point, is that these 6 which are grouped in 3 groups of 2. So these 3 groups of 2, they manifest, the groups manifest on different levels of advancement of Krishna consciousness. On the level of sadhana bhakti means right at the beginning level, when you're just starting, you've just started, and of course it may go on for a long time actually before you come to a much higher level. But at least when a devotee is on the level of sadhana bhakti, then the first 2 are present or should be present. If they're not present, then you're not really very well situated in sadhana bhakti. Yes, you may be in quite a mixed state if you're still maintaining material desires, and particularly if you're still engaged in materialistic activity, or even, you could say, flirting with materialistic activity in that, meditating, thinking about doing things against the regulative principles, for example, or that sort of thing. Right, so the first 2 then, they do manifest on the level of sadhana bhakti, and when a devotee is nicely situated in sadhana bhakti, then those first 2 will be very prominently manifest and recognizable by you, by the devotee, and by those who associate with the devotee. They'll see that, oh yes, look at how these 2 characteristics are present in the devotee very nicely. So those first 2 were that pure devotional service. Now, on the level of sadhana bhakti, brings immediate relief from all kinds of material distress. And of course, I know many of you, at least many of you, I know who you are, and quite a number I know you personally, and even for many years in some cases. And, generally I see that you're very blissful. You're happy in Krishna consciousness. That's what this means. You're not sort of moping around and agitated and disturbed and angry sometimes and all that sort of thing. But you're happy in Krishna consciousness. That means you're nicely situated in sadhana bhakti. Then, on the level of sadhana bhakti is the beginning of all auspiciousness. Your life transforms from, what is generally, don't mind me saying it, but it's generally a bit of a mess, actually, involved in all sorts of things which are just not very helpful, particularly from the Krishna conscious point of view, but even in many cases from any point of view. So these 2 symptoms manifest more or less, or actually simultaneously. They are sort of 2 sides of one coin, you could say. And when you've got a coin, you've got both sides. You can't just have one side. You've automatically got both sides. So generally, when a person, in the early stages, but they apply themselves nicely, then simultaneously they get relief and they feel relieved from so many of the problems and anxieties that are there in material life, and simultaneously, as a concomitant factor, their life becomes nice and auspicious. But then the next two manifest, really clearly become established in the life of a devotee when the devotee comes to the level of bhava. Now that's a high level. That's a high level. It's not just the difference between sadhana bhakti, particularly in the very early stages of sadhana bhakti, the difference between that and bhava bhakti is really quite considerable. It's not like the difference, for example, between, when we look at the process or the progress of devotional service in terms of 9 levels. Here we're looking in terms of 3 levels. But when we look at it in terms of 9 levels, from sadhu sangha, from shraddha to sadhu sangha, to bhajana kriya, to anatha nivritti, then nishta, then ruchi, then asakti, then bhava, and then prema. So the differences along the way, from the very beginning when you just start really trying to take up the practice of Krishna consciousness, which would mean, in fact, really speaking, it would mean bhajana kriya. Bhajana meaning, in the broad sense, not just singing bhajans, but devotional activities. And kriya means activities. So you're actually regularly engaged in a program of devotional activities. So from the level of bhajana kriya, for example, or even, let's just say it might be clearer, from the level of sadhu sangha, where you're not chanting 16 rounds. You might chant some rounds sometimes, but you're not really making a real effort to practice and become a devotee. You're around the association of devotees and enjoying it. Yeah, but you've got other quite deep involvements at the same time. So that's sadhu sangha. But then bhajana kriya, as we just said, means you've taken up Krishna consciousness. And now you are regularly chanting your rounds, following the principles, you have some service, you're associating with devotees regularly. So you see, there's a difference between just coming and attending the Sunday program sometimes, or festivals sometimes. That's more the sadhu sangha level. And then really practicing Krishna consciousness. So the difference between those 2 levels is not so great. I mean, there's a difference. So the 2 levels are distinguished from each other, but they're not that great as just beginning devotional service and coming to part of perfection, where you actually start realizing your eternal relationship with the Lord. Yes. So here, though, a devotee's progress through different levels is being divided into 3 stages. First of all, sadhana bhakti. Sadhana means practice, just practicing. Yeah. Practice means something like, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And you get it after a while. You get it. And you get into it. But it may take a little effort. But bhava means you are on a very elevated platform where you're seeing your relationship with the Lord. In fact, it is part of perfection. It is not part of practice. You're already in the early stages of actual perfection in your relationship with Krishna. So on that level, the next 2 apply. That pure devotional service on the level of bhava automatically puts you in transcendental pleasure. That doesn't mean that you feel good, it's nice. Like you have a nice kirtan. At our program last night, at the end, there was a nice kirtan. Ravindra Swarup Prabhu was leading a nice kirtan. I think some of you were there. And it was nice, and devotees were feeling good. But no, I didn't see any devotees. Or like this morning, we were chanting japa, and I didn't see any devotees rolling on the floor or with tears uncontrollably pouring from their eyes, their bodies shivering uncontrollably, like Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. These are symptoms of bhava. These are symptoms of bhava. They're ecstasies. And they're much more than just being enthusiastic and, getting into a kirtan and dancing, which is great. But these things are just in a different realm of experience that the devotee cannot remain standing up. The devotee collapses because the body is so overcome by overwhelming feelings of ecstasy. Like when Lord Caitanya would dance in kirtan, sometimes tears, of course, he's beyond bhava too, but tears would come from his eyes so forcibly as if from a syringe. And the people surrounding him their clothes would become saturated. There's another realm. That's another realm even further. But bhava means it really is part of perfection and not part of practice. So pure devotional service on the level of bhava immediately or automatically puts you in transcendental pleasure, means just another dimension of pleasure altogether. Yes. Then another characteristic is that on the level of bhava, pure devotional service on the level of bhava is rarely achieved. Yes, it's not. Even amongst the devotees, it's rarely achieved. Then the last 2, they are there when the devotee is on the level of prema. And that's just the ultimate goal of life, the ultimate perfection of life. So devotees who are performing devotional service, pure devotional service on the level of Krishna prema, they deride even the conception of liberation. To them, it just looks completely ridiculous. Yeah. How could someone prefer that over pure devotional service? To them, it seems, they can't understand. It just makes no sense. They deride the experience of liberation. And finally, pure devotional service on the level of prema is the only means to attract Krishna. So, what does that say about us? I mean, you and me. Well, it definitely says some things about us. But one thing that it says about us is that even though we are on the level of sadhana bhakti, let's just be very real about it and not have pretensions of anything, sort of highfalutin. Let's just accept it. We're on the level of sadhana bhakti. But sometimes we get mercy from Krishna. I mean, surely we've all seen that in our lives. We got some mercy from Krishna. Some apparently out of the blue, as they say. Well, of course, Krishna is blue, so it's not inappropriate. Yeah. Out of the blue, something just wonderful happens in our lives. Have you experienced that in Krishna consciousness? I assume you have. So that means that at least there's a touch, maybe like a little sliver or a little touch or a fraction of a touch or something in our attempts in devotional service, which, there's a little bit of something like that. A little bit of love, and I really mean a little. There's a letter of Srila Prabhupada's, if you go through his letter books, there's one letter to Mother Yamuna, in which Srila Prabhupada, Yamuna at that time was living in London. They had opened the London temple. Prabhupada had installed the deities, Radha and Ishwara, and Yamuna was still there afterwards, and she was, I think, the head pujari. And she wrote to Prabhupada, and the way Prabhupada, we don't see her letter, that's not included in the book, but the way Prabhupada's answering, it seems pretty clear. Well, in fact, he says that you say that sometimes when you see the deities, tears come to your eyes, and you ask, what is that? And Prabhupada, in a very straightforward way, says, that is bhava. And then she asks some other questions. Then you asked about something else, and this is that. And you asked about another thing, and that is this. And it wasn't like, wow, that was bhava. Wow. It was just, yeah, that's bhava. And, when you offer the bhoga to the deities, you must ring the bell. It's just, Prabhupada really took it in his stride. So there can be, and there will be, and there are little touches of higher levels, even when we're in the beginning stages, which we all are, including myself, even though I think I've probably been practicing longer than anyone else here. As of yesterday, 50 years. So, Oh no, Shuddhi Prabhu. Wow. Excuse me. 53 years. Ah, Krishna, Krishna. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I still consider myself a new devotee. Only 50 years. Yeah, just getting into it. So, but still, little touches of other levels come in. Krishna consciousness is never just mechanical. Just, like you press a button in a lift. You want to go to the first floor if you're lazy. You don't want to walk up the stairs. So you press the button, floor number 1, and there you are. You're on floor number 1. And if you press the button, floor number 4, the machine takes you to floor number 4. It's just mechanical. Krishna consciousness is never like that. It's very personal. It's always very personal. And these stages are not, it's not just stage 1, and then stage 2, and then stage 3. And when you come to stage 3, there are not touches left of even stage 1, and that they're not touches of stage 4. But otherwise, in a simple sense, in a broad sense, the different levels can be distinguished from each other. And therefore it becomes possible to recognize pretty much what level you're on, or what level you're mainly on. You can put it that way. Okay, so let's carry on. Srila Prabhupada then, after listing them out, he goes through them one by one. First is relief from material distress. And, for what it's worth, my experience of Krishna consciousness when I first, 50 years and 1 day ago, really tried to seriously get into it, I found that after about, as I recall, maybe 2 weeks, or maybe it was even something less, but I have some recollection like that, a couple of weeks, because I had many anxieties before I joined Prabhupada's movement. I had too many anxieties. I was one of these ones from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7. They may take up Krishna consciousness because of distress. That was me. Along with some interest in knowledge, but it was more to do with just too much distress. It was literally too much. But I noticed quite quickly, one morning I realized, hey, I'm not in anxiety. Yeah, those anxieties had basically just sort of dissolved. So then Prabhupada gives pretty substantial explanation, elaboration of what this means and what is involved actually in becoming free from material distress, or even what is involved in you getting material distresses. And he explains it in terms of karmic reactions, sinful reactions, which for which there are 4 stages of coming into effect, sinful reactions. The first level, technically, the Sanskrit term is called aprarabdha. Because as we'll see, the fourth stage is prarabdha, which means fully manifest. So the first stage is aprarabdha, fully unmanifest, completely unmanifest. You did some nonsense, and I mean not just you watched a Bollywood movie, but maybe you ate some meat or something. We're talking about those categories of nonsense, like real serious nonsense, for which you get really serious karmic reactions. And if you want to know what sort of karmic reactions you get for doing those serious types of nonsense, read the last chapter of the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the descriptions of the hellish planets, and you'll get a pretty clear idea. If that doesn't cure you of your attachment to whatever those activities, or some, or one of them, I don't know what will. So on the stage of aprarabdha, karma means completely unmanifest. The reaction is there. It's stored up. Sometimes the way Prabhupada puts it is that your karmic reactions are something like a mountain which is suspended just above your head. Just above your head, but it's big. It's a mountain. And every now and then, however often, one rock falls off the mountain, bang, and hits you on the head. That's one of your karmic reactions. But there's plenty left still. Yeah. But in the aprarabdha stage, then the reactions are completely unmanifest. There is no perceivable effect, but they're there waiting for their time. Then the second stage is called kutam, Kutam, which means some sign is coming. Yeah, something is going wrong, starting to, or seems like, something like that. And an example is given to illustrate how it may work. The example is if you get a serious sickness, and some serious sicknesses you may not know for quite a while. I mean, particularly something like cancer. I mean, there are so many different types, but you may not know for a long time. But more often than not, we give an easier example. A simpler example is malaria. I don't know if any of you have had malaria. By the grace of the Lord, I have not so far. Hare Krishna. And I'm sincerely hoping never to. But maybe some of you have had malaria. I know devotees who've had malaria. I've seen devotees. And at first you get a headache. And you think, yeah, I got a headache. Oh, well, what do you do when you take a headache? I had, at least on one occasion, right here in this temple room, I was here chanting my japa one morning, like after breakfast. And there I am, and one elderly gentleman from somewhere around Phoenix walks up to me and says, Swami, I wasn't a Swami at that time, but he said, Swami, I got a headache. Swami, you must pray for me, Swami. I got headache. And, he felt that, there you go, his headache is dealt with, or going to be shortly, because I will pray, I'll do anti-headache prayer. But I told him the honest truth, that you know what? When I get headaches sometimes, not often, but it happens. When I get a headache, I take Disprin. That's what I told him. And so I said, I suggest you go over to the shops, go to Clicks and buy some Disprin, and take a couple of Disprin. That should deal with it. And he looked at me like, what? The Swami is not meant to say things like that. But it was the truth. So, but yeah, the beginning of malaria, I am told by those who have had it, is you get a headache and you take some Disprin or some Panado, the usual sort of things, and it has a little effect, but not much. And then you see your headache's getting worse. Wow, maybe I need to take some more Panado. So that's like the Kutum stage. There's some symptoms in this example of malaria. Something's coming to you. Because, getting malaria is a sinful reaction, actually. So it's just a very practical example, too. But then the next stage is called bijam. Bijam. And in that stage, the sinful reaction manifests more. In the case of malaria, that, you just got a raging headache and you can't really walk much. It's a battle. And then comes the prarabdha, fully manifest state of the sinful reaction. And in terms of malaria, means you are bedridden, and that's it. You can't walk without being supported. Yeah. So, like this. So, but anyway, the point that Prabhupada's getting at, it's very important how Prabhupada's explaining all these things, because it'll help us understand our positions in life and what happens to us. But the thing is here, that in terms of pure devotional service on the level of sadhana bhakti, giving immediate relief to all sinful reactions, that all these things are just cleansed away. Once you really seriously, you've got to really apply yourself. Otherwise, you'll get some partial experience. But if you're really trying to engage in practical devotional service, like you've taken up chanting 16 rounds, now you are following the regulative principles, and you're doing service when you're able, like that, then so many of these things are really completely destroyed. So then Srila Prabhupada explains a very interesting point, which is that in our experience, even though according to what the Nectar of Devotion says that you get immediate relief from all kinds of material distress, but as devotees we find that we still sometimes get distresses. These things happen sometimes. generally it'll be much less. At least that was my experience. So much less. But sometimes you get sick. It's not that when you become a devotee, you never get sick for the rest of your life. You get sick. And sometimes some things happen in your life which are sort of recognizable in the context of karmic reactions. So what's happening? What happened? Does it mean that Krishna consciousness only works partially or sometimes or something like that? No. But Prabhupada explains that when a devotee surrenders to Krishna, means, as I was saying, seriously trying to practice 16 rounds, etc., and really making their best effort, a good effort, to be devotees. Then Prabhupada explains, Krishna takes away your sinful reactions. You know, Bhagavad Gita 1866. Don't you? Don't you? Don't you? Well, if you don't, learn it. If I was going to be giving this class again next Sunday, I would test some of you on it. Because it's just one of those verses that you should know. But Krishna says, Sarva Dharman Parityaja, etc. Abandon all varieties of religion, just surrender unto me. I'll deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. Such a famous verse, we've all heard it many times. So Krishna, moksha yishyami. Moksha means to free, to liberate. Yeah, it's the standard term for liberation is moksha. So Krishna says, moksha yishyami, I free you from your sinful reactions. Sarva papebhyo, all your pap, all your karma, your sinful reactions. I'll free you, ma shuchaha, don't fear. So what happens then when you find that you get quite sick sometime, which happens to literally all of us from time to time? Well, Prabhupada explains, Krishna takes your sinful reactions and uses them for the best benefit of the devotee, Prabhupada says. So Krishna now has taken all your karma. Actually, as soon as you seriously start practicing, at that point, Krishna takes all your karma. And then when things happen which appear to be like karmic reactions that you have experienced before when you were not a devotee, then it's Krishna. Then it's Krishna who is using your karma to teach you, usually to teach you a lesson. So therefore, when some challenge, either physical, emotional, in terms of relationships, or just, like devotees in Ukraine, in terms of some incredible political happening, then you have to understand it's vital that Krishna is using some of my karmic reactions, which he took, but he is trying to teach me something. And often there's a few things he's trying to teach you, and often the first thing is that when are you going to get tired of feeling that this material world is a nice place to live and it's okay and yeah, it's all right? Yeah, when are we going to really lose, not just lose, but give up our attachment for certain, little special things about material life which we like? There was a famous Sanskrit scholar in ISKCON, Kushakrata Prabhu, who was, very expert in Sanskrit. When he was initiated, Prabhupada asked him, what are the 4 regulative principles? And he recited the 4 regulative principles successfully. And Prabhupada said, which is your favorite? So, look at yourself, ask yourself, which is your favorite? I suspect there may be one still, at least a little bit. It's possible, not impossible. So if there's still traces of material desire in the heart, Krishna wants to help us to get free from them. So he puts us in certain situations from time to time. And you know what, devotees? We have run out of time. And what to speak of getting through the whole chapter? I haven't even got through this whole first one. But could one of you, whoever's an official here, Mother Sukumari, you're an official. You are, actually. Can someone make sure that you carry on next Sunday, sort of in the middle of Prabhupada's explanation about freeing us from material distress? Is that okay? I won't be here. Right. Yes. Right. Okay. No, that's true. That's true. I remember when Krishna, for some obscure reason, but anyway, Krishna made me the chairman of the GBC body for the first time. And when it happened, I thought, Krishna, if you really want me to do it, I'll try my best. But Krishna, I think you're crazy. I actually thought like that. That's a confession. Because I just couldn't understand, Krishna, why are you doing this? Why me? It's ridiculous. Me, I'm just not the type. But it was Krishna. He wanted to teach me something. And I definitely learned some things. It may be you giving this class next week, Sunday. It's quite likely. I don't know, but... Okay, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. That's all, devotees.